What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 354. My name's Steve, one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
Guys, how's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Steve, did you know?
Pretty good.
Steve, did you know, John, that we are becoming more active on YouTube?
I've
Did
heard.
you know that?
No,
I've
it can't
heard
be true.
rumors.
Can't be
You
true.
heard a distant rumor. Yeah, more active on YouTube.
No,
More
Ronald,
stuff,
that would be
more...
too much. We're already killing it in the podcast realm,
Already.
audio and video. And if someone were to say, are these guys going to amp it up in either place? I sure hope it's not YouTube, because that would be too much. That's too much.
Yeah.
Don't tell me we've done it.
We've done it. We've
Ronald.
dyed our hair blonde, and we're fucking going to restaurants, eating burgers, putting out the good work that is Movie Schmovie in all shapes and forms, including YouTube Shorts.
Was that a Guy Fieri thing?
That's where he was going, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was like, he's driving around to diners, whatever.
You took us on a little mental journey. It was a little puzzle.
That was a
there.
trip, yeah.
Blonde hair, okay. I'm with that. And then eating burgers.
I was like, blonde hair, dyed my hair black. Zac Efron, diners. Nope, not him. Who is it? Oh man, yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, part of me feels like we should have left some of it for someone else, because we're just doing too much and too well in things. But I mean, you know what? If you can do so, let's do it. But yeah, no, they're great, and you're doing it. We're trying to build that out. You're doing a great job with that, and
Thanks.
yes, Movie Schmovie.
I mean, it's our content. It's not like I'm not pulling shit and making gold. There's already gold that I'm just adding it down.
Yeah.
What a line. And more like that all over on the YouTube Movie Schmovie channel, youtube.com/Movie Schmovie podcast. But yeah, go over there if you haven't yet to the YouTube. If you can listen and watch these full episodes there if you want to do that every Friday. But yeah, we're starting to put out more shorts during the week. Something short, concise, news, trailer, stuff that drops in between episodes that we can't be as timely on. That's a lot of the motivation. There's also clips from the full episodes that will be dropping too, to kind of give a little taste of what is on the full episode. Because I think it was Jack Black that said in Orange County, you only give a little half nip, you don't give them the whole nip. You got to keep them one and more. Mm-hmm. He did that in the admission video for college. Like you don't show the whole nip, you only show half. I didn't quote it very well.
Advice. It's good advice.
It sounded good to me.
Go watch Orange County. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so it's exciting to see that, and hopefully it helps build awareness for the podcast, for the full episodes that we put out every Friday. And I really like just the idea of being timely with some of that news, because like it's probably our main blind spot. A weekly show, we always have a news section, the bigger items we dive into a little deeper. But some of the things that we talk about nonstop on our text thread is like stuff that we want to just talk about on the podcast, and sometimes we can't. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool to just post it on the YouTube in a short format, something clear, something very short, less than a minute, like you said, Ronald. And just to get a little taste of the show and the fun that we have on the show. So if that sounds like something you want to follow along with, maybe get some of the news throughout the week from us. It's again, youtube.com/Movie Schmovie podcast.
Check us out. Probably sounding like the guy from the Micro Machines commercials, because we'll be like trying to pack so much in.
Yeah, we're going to record it at normal speed, and Ronald will just cut it down.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It'll take us 3 minutes to record it, and then it's like he'll just speed it up to get it under that cap.
Does that cross generations, Micro Machines? I know you guys are a little bit behind me.
I'm on it.
Our generation.
Yeah. We're there, but I think we just lost probably no one on the podcast. I don't know anybody that listens.
Well, I'll just say this: Micro Machines commercials always had a guy talking really fast, talk about the product on the commercials, or at least for a while that was their thing. And I think that guy, outside of those commercials, he like went on talk shows and went around doing appearances just because he could talk really fast. I mean, that was an example of like, I remember that. That's like a hangover of like variety shows of the 70s and 80s, that sometimes someone would have like a weird thing they did, and that was all they did. And essentially this guy was, like an auctioneer without an auction, just going around talking fast. And he, managed to turn it into quite a career. I should know his name.
And that right there will be the next short on
Yeah, see? Boom.
YouTube.com/
Except Ronald, if you do that,
podcast.
put his name up on the screen so that we know that.
and speed John up 4 times.
Yeah.
And put like a cut out, like a head floating in the middle of the screen. I'm a big fan of that.
The floating head?
The floating head, yeah.
So we got a lot to get to. We're going to do our required viewing in a moment, and we're going to do like a kind of a catch up on the first season of House of the Dragon. But speaking of news, there was a pretty big news item that dropped. We'll record this on a Wednesday, but on Tuesday this week, beyond the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, the teaser dropping or the trailer dropping / leaking, later the same day, huge announcement comes out of DC that James Gunn and Peter Safran are basically going to be co-chair, co-CEO.
Both of those.
Yeah, those two things of a rebranded DC Films DC Films, DC Studios now.
Yeah.
Wow. Like I was like stunned when I saw it. Even in me sending it to you guys, I was just like, this feels massive.
We should all get fired the way that James Gunn was fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me go find that thing that I did that was like not appropriate and see how my trajectory. But yeah, I mean,
listeners, go back and listen to the early episodes of the show and just tell us which
find it
episodes
for us.
We said inappropriate things on. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. This is like crazy. Like we're all fans of James Gunn. Like most of the things that we've talked about that he's had any hand in on this show has been pretty much positive, and especially most recently talking about Peacemaker, which, you know, might be one of the better DC things, in my opinion, that they've put out in the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I mean, to see his kind of run with Marvel coming to a close with the 2 last Guardian projects, and then seeing this announcement, it kind of was, I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you. What are you guys thinking about this? What was your initial feeling to reading about this announcement?
I think more than the announcement, like effective November 1st. Like, how crazy is that? I have that they're going to work November 1st is when they start, which is insanely close. You know, it's like crazy to think that they are starting whatever iteration of DC. I guess I want to talk about one of the biggest headlines that I kind of read that was there, which was on the internet, that it basically, a lot of people feel like it's a bad idea because he has like kind of an adult tone to his things, very heavy duty, nasty jokes from time to time. And I don't think that's going to be the tone of everything that he does. Mm-mm. And I think that just kind of, you know, he's a novelist. He's, you know, he's written things that aren't necessarily this heightened. And to just give him one note, look at Guardians. Guardians isn't schlock. It's like actually really rooted in emotion and connections and incredible soundtrack to match. So like to think that he's just gonna tell dick jokes for every movie, like Batman's gonna be like, oh, my dick itches, I gotta go to Gotham. It's just like it feels a little.
You made me laugh. You made me laugh. So
my dick itches.
It just feels really.
Let's go to Gotham.
Yeah.
So what, they can figure out why your dick itches? Is the greatest detective going to solve that crime?
It just feels so dismissive. That's what people think he's going to talk about, man.
Oh my god,
that's kind of a first draft line.
Oh man,
my dick itches. Let's go to Gotham.
Oh my god.
Because the word's out that when you have that symptom, you go to Gotham.
Yeah, right. Go to Gotham.
I mean, that's the word on the street, guys.
They've got creams in Gotham. I think the sort of other headline to, I mean, Pete Safran is obviously, or Peter Safran, is that, which is it? Peter? Pete.
It's, if you know him well, it's maybe Pete, but to us it's Peter.
Mr. Safran. I mean, obviously that's a huge factor in this, because this is a co-CEO, this is a co-lead in both cases. However,
right.
I think an important thing to look at this as is that essentially what this means is that DC has, or Warner Brothers has, James Gunn locked into DC projects for 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you hear that it's like a temporary status or whatever, it's a 4-year thing, that sounds like, oh, that's the kind of contract you might make. But also, like for a filmmaker like James Gunn, that's what he's committing at this point to Warner Brothers is, that the next 4 years he's, because he's a guy who does have lots of projects going at any given moment. And I feel like every few months I heard different news about some DC-based project or show that he was developing that might be a spinoff of Peacemaker, might be something different. Clearly DC likes what he's up to. I think he likes the kind of creative freedom or at least freedom of tone that DC was giving him over there. But the idea that he's going to be able to shape a multi-movie plan or even just dictate some structure as to which characters get spotlighted and what kind of movies get greenlit. I think that in the end, that James Gunn flavor that we like, that you were talking about, is something that could sustain a multi-film or multi-franchise approach, especially because of what you're saying, Ronald. The guy's not going to do the same tone for everything. Like Peacemaker is very much a dick joke, hard R kind of show. I think James Gunn knows. He knows that if he's doing the Batman,
maybe that's what got his. Maybe that's what made his dick itch.
It's what it is. It's kind of like a Spidey sense. It's like when there's trouble, when someone's committing a crime. Batman's dick itches. Anyway, I can't believe we haven't gone this hard into the bro humor in years.
It's been a minute, so
it's been a long time.
It's okay.
At any rate, it's fitting talking about James Gunn because like dick jokes with heart is kind of what that guy does. But I think he can modulate, and I think that the main thing is we're going to see him have a plan that maybe will get them into some of that stuff that, again, I think he does well. I know not everybody loves his tone, but I think he's great at making me care about characters and then sometimes surprising me with what happens to them. And both of those things are key to this kind of storytelling. So whatever that means, I think the important thing about the November 1st announcement is that they're letting you know that this new team had nothing to do with Black Adam. That's the messaging there. It's that, like, it's they're starting on November 1st. It's like a way to let you know that nothing that has happened up till now is happening. That nothing that they've put in motion is part of the current plan. That's sort of like a fresh start kind of thing. I'm kidding about Black Adam. It's not that bad, but
I mean that is a very key distinction because you've got to believe that they have been maybe not a part of that happening, but they have to have been involved
behind the scenes.
These discussions about what's going forward. Because of the things that are already in play. Like the Aquaman sequel, Flash, what else? Like Blue Beetle, like that are still alive and coming to a theater soon, relatively soon. If you're talking 4 years, I mean, they're going to be a part of those things, including some big thing that is kind of being teased in Black Adam, and it makes it's very curious to see how they blend that all together. If the whole motivation is doing what, Zaslav talked about back at the shareholders meeting in terms of like having a new vision for this whole franchise, even in name, comparing it to what Kevin Feige's done in Marvel,
right?
Like that's a pretty big undertaking. And to say it's for a 4-year thing at this point, and we've got 3 or 4 things already moving, it's like finding that intersection. What that, I believe, and that's the word, is that eventually they will be recasting Flash. They will be doing some big things. And between now and that movie coming out, I wouldn't be shocked if that's actually a part of that movie. And, I don't know, it's a big undertaking. And to be a part of that, it's got to be exciting for the two of them, especially with their track record. Both with James Gunn as a filmmaker and writer in the comic world, and even Peter Safran. He's done a lot of production for WB, Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers Discovery. And even with James Wan, he was a part of Aquaman. He's done a lot with the Conjuring series. So he's a part of that system already. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but just, a pretty eye-opening and jaw-dropping announcement to me to see James Gunn being announced as like the conductor or co-conductor of what's happening for this entire franchise.
And like you said, Steve, it is a big job for him. Like this is a big deal, and for him it must be a little bit like being given the keys to the like the toy factory, sort of. It's like this guy loves these characters and loves the kind of possibilities of this kind of stuff. And again, I think the 4-year thing too, it could continue, but I think that he's a guy who doesn't like to be too hemmed in and too pegged as one type of filmmaker. So I mean, I don't know. I just can't imagine that he doesn't have big things planned. I wouldn't be surprised. My prediction is that Ambush Bug will finally be made into a movie or a show. And if you don't know about Ambush Bug, look it up. But it's a tailor-made for James Gunn kind of.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look it up.
He started off as a minor Superman villain who became such a joke that they just started using him as a kind of almost like a Deadpool-like character. He seems to be a little bit aware of the meta aspects of being in comics, and then after that, he just became a comedy character, like not a good guy or a bad guy. Really, he just showed up in his own comics, and it was always like a comedy version of what was happening in the DC universe at the time. So, anyway, Ambush Bug. That's my prediction. Give it within 4 years, maybe. You'll hear that name mentioned.
Ambush Bug. Okay, yeah. I'll keep looking around.
But anyway, so that's all, and that's also exciting for us because he's one of our guys. So yay, James. And and what a trajectory. We referred to the firing, but it's pretty hilarious how that went. Got fired, got hired, got hired. Got hired.
Yes.
It's like 3 hires in a row. And the hires got better each time, And I do think there's some whiff of him closing things out with Marvel, the way that he's talked about things with regards to the Guardians character. He has left it open that he would do something for them in the future, and I don't doubt that somewhere down the road he might. But I feel like this is a real sign of, where his head is at, what you're saying, Steve. This has to have been, something he hasn't been able to talk about until now, as far as like why he might know so much or why he might be so tied up with DC stuff. But yeah, otherwise the Guardians trailer, the Guardians Christmas special trailer would have been something that would have felt momentous, and we would be talking about that maybe. But instead, like you said, Ronald, it was kind of the cool trailer leaked. Oh, that's interesting. That's our James Gunn for the day. What? No. Oh, he's running DC now. Oh. And they've sort of changed the branding too, right? It's gone from DC Extended Universe to now they're just calling it the DC Universe. I saw
that too, yeah.
But I don't know if that's an actual dictate or if that's just the way this is being reported. But that never quite made sense to me, calling it the Extended Universe anymore.
The Extended Universe. Glad they got rid of it.
Out of here, Extended. All right. Well, you picked it, Ronald. Let's talk a little bit about this week's required viewing. I can't wait to get into this one with you guys.
Yeah. So my pick for this week was for the required. My pick for the required viewing last week was The Serpent and the Rainbow. The Serpent and the Rainbow. The Serpent and the Rainbow.
The Serpent and the Rainbow. Yes.
Yeah. Based on a book. And some of the material was taken into this fictitious story that is
very lightly based on a book. I have a feeling
very lightly,
based especially on like the last act. I really don't think any of that is in a true story, but
so that was my pick, and I guess one of the things I didn't realize was it's a little harder to get than I expected, and I apologize for that.
Oh, really? It was on Peacock for free.
It was on Peacock. Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Me either.
Peacock is. I've high praise for Peacock lately.
There was like 2 minutes of commercials you had to sit through at the beginning, and then it was no commercials after that. So
really,
yeah.
Okay, well, it is on Peacock.
Unless Peacock doesn't have like subscriptions under it the way other services do. It's not like Amazon. Yeah,
now,
it's just Peacock. Yeah,
I do know that the high end one makes things available that aren't available to the standard one. So
I would find it strange if I was paying for the high end Peacock, because I really don't think I get bargain birds across the board.
Bargain birds. But yeah, what'd you guys think about the movie?
Well, let's talk a little bit about what it is and who made it. Like Wes Craven.
Oh yeah, Wes Craven
is the guy. And I was realizing we've talked about A lot of Wes Craven on this show, because we've done
Mm-hmm.
we did the Scream series, we did every one of those movies on this show, and we've done the Nightmare on Elm Street series, which had 3 directed by old Wes.
Yeah.
Correct? 3 directed by Wes, or just 2? He directed 1 and 3, and then New Nightmare, or did he not direct 3?
He didn't direct 3. Chuck Russell
Okay,
did.
so just 1 and New Nightmare.
New Nightmare.
So yeah, in that sense, this Wes Craven is one of our guys too, I guess. But I do think there's something about the quality that he brings to a film that you can feel even in a film that has dated aspects and feels very of its time, like this one. But it's basically, like you said, it's a true story, or it's based on the true story, and it's like a real grounded attempt to show you what real life voodoo zombie. Kind of, there's urban legends about zombies that are based on voodoo, Haitian voodoo, and this is sort of a a true story of a very white man, a man so white that his nickname is White. They call him Blanc in this, but it's very much a white guy amongst a bunch of black people, and there's often he's scared of them just because they're black. It seems. Maybe that was just my reading of it, but I felt like the optics of the time were very strange, that often at times Haitian culture and just street culture is presented as though it is scary to Bill Pullman. But so often he seems to be like the butt of the joke of this thing. So as he gets deeper into this Haitian voodoo conspiracy, he seems a little bit like, it's almost like Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China, or like Bruce Campbell to some extent, that seeing him get knocked around and getting the piss knocked out of him is kind of part of the movie's mission statement. I even thought his color scheme was very Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead. He had like the brown pants and the blue shirt, and I wondered if that was Wes Craven doing a little nod, because Bill Pullman definitely seems like you're supposed to sort of see him as the hero, but you're also supposed to see that he's, there's something kind of whiny and punchable about him. Or maybe that was just me seeing it that way.
He has one of the best yells I've ever heard in a film. Like, he yells quite a bit. And, I think that was one thing I was super afraid of, is like, how racist will this feel? Watching something. And I guess this is a half compliment. Given the time and the opportunity that Wes could have had to make this more racist, it is only a cursory level of racist versus, like racism of the time versus like somebody being like, let's make them look crazy. It doesn't feel like that funny enough. And I think I was expecting that a little more. It felt like they were more like, white man, stop coming back to this situation. And he kept coming back, and it got worse and worse and worse. Whereas when I watched it when I was a kid, I was like, all these things are happening to him. But I'd forgotten that he left like 3 times and kept coming back. Did they nail his dick?
They put a spike through his scrotum.
Spike through a scrotum.
I like how they had to. I don't know if that was Bill Pullman's contract or if that's just male, like whatever, paranoia or something that feeds into the script. But they had to really hammer it home. No pun intended. They had to really hammer it home that he was still functioning. Like the narration said, I was alive and intact. And then like a later scene, he's sitting there talking to the woman, and he's saying, "So it's just my scrotum, right?"
It was just a hole in the scrotum. Is what he said.
He's like, you got to put that in that script.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Bill Pullman doesn't get his nuts smashed.
I don't think that I realized when I was a kid how heightened Bill Pullman's performance was. Like, when I was a kid, I was just like, this is how I would be if I were scared. I'd be a bumbling kind of guy. But watching it now, he is so, and I'm not even talking about, like, if you watch Spaceballs, he's really silly in that. It's not even the same tone as Spaceballs. It's a little more.
You're saying, wait. You're saying that Wes Craven's The Serpent and the Rainbow doesn't have the same tone as Mel Brooks's Spaceballs? This statement
do that.
merits further inspection.
But
no, I know what you mean. Is that, well, I thought about his character in Ruthless
heightened.
People. I don't know if you know Ruthless People, but in that he plays like the blonde, like frosted tips kind of surfer dude, kind of bimbo guy, and there were shades of that in this character. He was playing certain moments like almost with like a dumb look on his face, you know? And I really wonder how much that was just them going for intensity and Bill Pullman being a gifted actor, but more at home with like light comic acting than like intense acting, and how much that was the intention. Like, did you guys think it was the intention to sort of show like one of those things where halfway through the horror movie, you realize that the protagonist is kind of a dupe?
Yeah. Has to be, man.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know that I really kind of like thought about that watching this. And I realized that I think I too watched this when I was like really young, and I didn't remember a lot of this movie. So like rewatching it, I don't think I watched watching it this time. I don't feel like I liked it as much as I thought I did, or thought I remembered liking it. And it may have just simply been that like I was like in love with Wes Craven at that point, and like was just probably loving everything that he did. Like even just in this movie,
even
like
Deadly Friend.
Even Deadly Friend, Christy Swanson. Yo, I have that on VHS, one room over, John.
Is it a basketball that she uses to kill?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I love that movie. Not even joking. But yeah,
that might be a future required viewing.
Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, shocker. There's even like things in this movie that really kind of like feel like nods to his prior movies or movies, that, he had a hand in making, even to that chair, sequence at the end, like that is totally Shocker-esque, or maybe Shocker was after that. I can't remember which came first, but
it's also Nightmare on Elm Street-esque because it's like a nightmare element. My favorite part of the chair part, Steve, was when it's like chasing him and it like almost comes in the door and it kind of like leans in the door and then goes like
and backs up.
Yeah, the chair's like, oh, you.
It's like, yeah, that's what I thought going there. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like I did still enjoy it. And I mean, I do think it's kind of like a crazy story, especially if some of it, what the pieces of it that are based on truth, and like
the first 5 minutes are probably true.
Probably, or just the idea that, of what this chemical or this powder was, that it is legitimately like something that they still study and that is known to have a similar effect on humans. But I don't know, like I just felt like it really kind of came off to me as like kind of silly at times. And I'm not speaking just to Bill Pullman's performance. Like I actually came out of it thinking like I kind of forget about Bill Pullman in that era. Yeah. A lot of times, like you said, like Ruthless People or Spaceballs is probably the most common one, but like this
Independence Day is the one.
Independence Day is, a few years later. But I mean, that 80s era, Bill Pullman, like he's like a stud. Like he's tall and attractive, and like they really kind of play up kind of some moments in the movie, like the romance between them is kind of weird, but like I kind of forget it in terms of that era. Like he was one of the it guys at that time, to see him in a Wes Craven kind of horror thriller, and especially some of the stuff he does in the movie. And, some of the imagery in the movie, like, the sequence when he's kind of like in the coffin and the blood's kind of coming up from beneath him and kind of covering his, that's some pretty cool stuff for like a star to be doing in like a horror movie. Cause it's him, you can see it's him doing that sequence, and, just some cool imagery in the movie for sure. And I mean, the whole voodoo element is definitely very creepy and, spooky, and mixing that with like the civil unrest that the country's going through at that time. I think it's just like everything is so heightened in the movie that it makes it entertaining, and the whole time you're kind of just feeling like it feels kind of natural. Like what you're watching to me feels like you're just watching people, like beyond some of the special effects and things when it gets into some of those sequences. But like so much of it being filmed on location and things like that really kind of lends itself to really kind of feeling immersive, especially because I didn't really remember a lot about the movie. So within the first 10 minutes, it's like, it's very like ingrained in the culture, like when they're there and, talking about the different kinds of magic or the different kinds of voodoo, and, Celine, what was that his name? Celine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus, the other voodoo, the voodoo doctor, like, I don't know, just like that balance of stuff. I didn't remember any of that from the movie, honestly. Like I only really remembered the imagery of Bill Pullman in the casket and like that blood sequence and the chair sequence. Like basically the last like 30 minutes is what I remembered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Just a quick note. I just looked on Wikipedia. It was 1986, Ruthless People, 1987, Spaceballs, 1988, this.
Right. Like,
So who was Bill Pullman at this point? I think it's interesting that you're pointing out his kind of leading man qualities, Steve. I think you're right, but I also think he's one of those guys who plays the quote unquote Baxter character, in the romantic comedy, because when he does a leading man, he has a slightly off. There's something about him, like and oftentimes those guys who are like leading man-ish, like in mainstream movies, they'll have a type that they play. Oh, he plays the dumb guy, or he plays like this. The president in Independence Day is like the solid kind of dad vibe or something that Bill Pullman can give. And then the romantic comedy, the jilted lover type, like he plays that guy. If that guy's gonna get to play the action lead in a movie, right? It's probably going to be a genre movie or a horror movie or something where they're like, well, you know what? We can't get Harrison Ford. We can't get Kurt Russell, but we can get Bill Pullman, and he can stand there and put his chin out, and he looks pretty convincing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why you see those types of actors doing this kind of like you said, really going for it in a genre role. I also don't doubt that Bill Pullman could have seen Bruce Campbell getting blood sprayed on him in Evil Dead and thought that looks fun, because some of that stuff in this movie really did feel like it's going for that kind of, it's like a mixture of a nightmare sequence from an Elm Street movie and something else. And even the way the climax ends up being this physical brawl, but with mystical overtones, it reminded me of the end of either a Candyman movie or a Freddy movie or something.
Totally.
It had that feel.
Yeah.
And you almost see the template that could have turned into a series around this, the idea of these kind of voodoo priests who could keep coming back. And I got to say, what happens to that voodoo priest at the end was so grisly and like just awful to look at, that it felt, there was that was disturbing. There was some disturbing imagery in this. I even think the kind of bride character that pops up in a couple of situations, and she's ripping her face apart and stuff, that was pretty creepy. Also, ends on a freeze frame. Can't beat a movie that ends on a freeze frame. It's got to be a sudden freeze frame, Ronald. It can't be a freeze frame that feels like you're building up to it. It has to be sudden and a little bit weird.
Yeah. It's kind of a similar situation. Like Steve, like I remember the confrontation, and I don't think I thought, it's crazy. I remember elements of what the man was saying, like, that he was taunting.
Yeah.
Because he was punching him. Like, I remembered that, but I didn't remember that it came from that movie. And you're right. Toward the end, that last 10 minutes or so got so cartoonish. Like it kind of was what I needed. And I think as a kid, you know what? It's strange. Like I thought of this as a horror film, but watching it feels like a thriller with horror elements more than I watched this time. And I kind of took it in like that. It felt very very lived in, like you were saying, like very lived in, to the point where I was like, why does this feel so authentic? I don't know. Like, even if some of the story elements of the voodoo didn't feel, whatever, however you feel about voodoo and its cultural representation is one thing, but the townspeople, the interactions with them, the regular looking people that they had just kind of being there present, like when he's panicking, he kind of just he bumps into the guy and he's like, no, don't touch me. I don't want anything to do with it.
No, I made a note, Ronald. That might be my favorite moment in the thing, because that guy was so like, don't put that on me. Don't put that on me. Yes. I'm just walking down the street. You're cursed. You're doomed. Everybody here knows it. No, that scene was good. Like that was him wandering around, not knowing what's happened to him, and seeing him kind of in the role of, the guy we've seen before, because that's kind of the urban legend that's at the heart of this like grounded voodoo idea of zombies, which is someone dies in a village and then someone says, I saw them working in the field in this neighboring village, and then it's like the suggestion is there's somebody that has like workers that are all people under their control, and that maybe they were people that were drugged and killed, quote unquote, killed in this way and then brought back. If you add in mystical dark art stuff, then it's like a little bit more nefarious, the idea that this person has kind of enslaved people. to work for them. And you know, there's a little bit of both going on in this movie. The idea that there's a, you know, mystical control, but also that it's based on this drug. So yeah, I think that this movie kind of like plays into stereotypes of voodoo stuff, but I also think it does present it kind of to what you were getting at, Ronald. I think like I would agree this, like it does actually try to show you the way that voodoo is part of a religion and a culture that goes beyond the kind of black magic that is the heart of this story. So I think that in some ways it's one of those, like you said at the very beginning, for its time, this portrayal is actually a little bit more nuanced than you might think it is. That doesn't mean that it holds up in 2022 and that it holds up as a cultural depiction. And again, I think if you told this story today, you just wouldn't put a white man at the center of it. If you wanted to tell a story about voodoo and Haitian culture, and they were actually shooting in Haiti, and then I think they had to leave because of political unrest, and they finished in the Dominican Republic. But one thing I wanted to say too, I learned from looking at Wikipedia, is that this movie was 98 minutes, and it was a brisk 98 minutes. You know, it really kind of moved along. The original edit was 184 minutes.
Oh my God.
And then it's like, oh, we took out some stuff to make it move a little faster. And it's like, yeah, no shit, you did. I can't imagine the 3-hour version of this movie. Maybe you would have just gotten more character stuff, but still, it seems like that would have been a huge mistake for this to feel long. I really enjoy when a movie like this is under 100 minutes. That's a sign that it might be, you know, a painless watch. So.
All right. So overall, did you like it? Would you?
No, I enjoyed watching it. I feel like I maybe saw it. I saw it. I think we rented this tape in college at some point, and I don't know that I've seen it all the way through since then. And I may have been very distracted watching it the first time. So I kind of feel like this was the first time I've really seen it with adult eyes and can really retain it. And no, it was interesting. Like even when there were aspects of it that were a little schlocky. I like seeing a Wes Craven movie. We've said it before. He's just always got a little something on his mind, a little something under the hood, and there is a production value and a style that he brings to his films. And I see it more and more now that I can kind of compare, like, what does this movie have in common with a Scream film, with a Nightmare on Elm Street film, and you can start to see there's a certain kind of vibe that Wes brings. So yeah, no, I appreciated getting a chance to watch it. Mm-hmm. Steve, does that mean you're picking something for next time?
Yeah. I'm actually, I had two movies that I was going back and forth on, and I'm trying to think of the one that maybe you guys haven't seen. I'm going to go with the less known one. All right. I'm going to go with, just make sure I got the year right. The best year, arguably the best year of film ever, 1999. This is a movie that came out directed by Antonia Bird, I believe it was, after a kind of a troubled production, let's say. Stars Robert Carlyle, David Arquette, Jeremy Davies, but most importantly, my Guy Pearce.
Yes.
This is a Weird West cannibal horror dark comedy thriller. It's called Ravenous. And I absolutely love this movie. And I remember when I used to work at the local video store, and even when I worked at Hollywood Video, it would be one of like 10 movies. Like if somebody was like, what's a movie I've never seen? Or, you know, like a weird horror movie, I would always recommend this movie and people would love it. And again, though, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. John, you seem to maybe have seen it.
I knew from the cast what movie you were talking about. And I think this was another thing that I saw like in a crowded situation. So I know this movie, but I don't really know what happens in it. I just know kind of the imagery and the sort of style of it. So I'm looking forward to it. And it kind of came out amongst a lot of other big movies, and it's a smaller budget film. You know, it's a smaller scale, but you know, it's this really cool cannibal horror thriller, but taking place in, you know, the West and, you know, 19th century. And Ravenous.
Ravenous. It sounds like Bone Tomahawk a little bit.
It's more of it's got a slightly more darkly comic tone than Bone Tomahawk, but it's in that zone of like, cowboy movie that goes there. And it's gory. It's gory. So that comparison's there.
Ravenous.
Yeah, I've been wanting to rewatch this one. I listened to Guy Pearce on a podcast recently, and just reminded me why I love him so much. And I know I mentioned Animal Kingdom before as one of my picks, so this is sticking with the Pierce. Just want more people to appreciate him, I guess, and he's awesome in this movie. So yeah, Ravenous from 1999 on for next week's required viewing.
Nice.
Noich. So yeah, let's talk about some dragons.
Let's hop on our dragons. Our young,
cool.
Our young
dragons.
Let's hop up on the backs of our young dragons and take them through this storm. I'm sure we'll get through this storm safely and make it home.
No doubt.
Our dragon seems to be struggling a little bit to get ahead of the winds, and as long as we don't run into a giant dragon that can bite us into pieces with one big chomp, then I think we're fine. So,
chances of that very, very low.
Onward ho. Could three of us ride on one dragon, or because these dragons, they're very linked to one rider? Would they be like, no, I like Steve, but I don't like John, or Ronald can ride, but those other two can't. Yeah. And it's not a weight thing. I think the dragons could handle the weight. It might just be they're like, no, this person can't hang.
Yeah,
but I'd like to think there's a schmovie dragon that we could all hop on and ride around.
Okay, I think so too.
We get that branding on that dragon. Yeah, that would really get people listening to the pod.
Yeah. The way on the show they talk about who's got more dragons as far as which army's going to win.
Yeah.
If we get in early as the podcast that has a dragon,
done.
Right.
It's over.
Right.
It's over. So first season of House of Dragon wrapped up this past week. I guess just very simple, quick response. Go around the horn here. What did you think of the first season, Ronald?
Best first season of a show that I've seen in quite some time, especially in the sci-fi genre.
Okay, John.
Met fantasy.
I think it was kind of a slow burn, and I think it got me from being I'm not even sure if I'm interested in this show and the characters it's dealing with. It got me back into this world that I love and back into that Game of Thrones feeling that was so intoxicating for so many years. So yeah, I was sort of sad this past Sunday when I realized, no more weekly dose of Westeros.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think that one of the things you just said is the key is just getting you back into that feeling. We talked about it on a couple episodes back when we were talking about it when the season started, but getting you back into that feeling of hearing that theme song kick in, and that feeling of, this is the penultimate episode or the whatever of season of Game of Thrones, some shit's about to go down. And I think it just, you guys are spot on. I totally agree. I love this season. I love the show in a nutshell. I think they really accomplished a lot, in terms of introducing the players, seeing where the tables are and how everything's set up for the season to come. Like you said, though, I feel the biggest downside is just that the realization that I won't watch it again for a year or so.
Yeah. If that, I mean,
I
somehow would be surprised if they get based on where we are in this calendar year, a year from now seems very soon. And this show always takes a little extra time, but they have been working on the second. This wasn't a show where they had to wait to find out if they had a second season.
That's true. That's true.
And that actually gets into another thing that I'm confident about this show. I feel a little bullish on it storytelling wise because it is, George R.R. Martin and the showrunners have expressed the sort of storyline that they've staked out from the books. This is not taken from novels. This is taken from that one book, Fire and Blood, that's a history. And so there are historical accounts in a book that are written as though they were written by someone in the time of the story.
So historians,
right. So it's written to be a document that can be contradicted by the show. So
totally
so with George R.R. Martin's influence and and blessing, they can take the prescribed story as laid out in these histories and say, well, this one sentence here that tells what people believe happened, we can show you what really happened. For instance, there's a character on the show who's believed dead by most characters. We know they're not dead. In the book, they're dead. But on the show, you can see there's a conspiracy that the people that quote unquote wrote the histories didn't know. So the show can play with that meta aspect and surprise even people who are super nerdy about the content. But the upshot of that is they've said this is a 4-season story that they're telling.
Wow.
And that's what Game of Thrones needed, was a roadmap from. It needed all the novels to be finished, like it needed that roadmap, because
It's
Game of
based on
Thrones,
that, yeah.
whatever you think of the remaining, like the last 3 seasons or so of Game of Thrones, 3 or 4, the showrunners did the best they could, but there was a turn in the storytelling that changed when they didn't have books to base it on anymore. And I just think this show feels like, it's like the way I felt about Better Call Saul. I think I may have said this before when we
Totally.
touched
Yeah, you
on it.
did.
It's like, okay, the creators behind this show, they know what works. They know what to do. They know what to push. They know what not to do. And now they're the same team in the same vibe with the same theme song, bringing it back. And like, not to be nostalgic, this show does take you in new directions, and it does try to surprise you. And it does focus on a smaller group of characters and a smaller geographical focus. And a lot of that did make me feel a little claustrophobic at certain points as compared to the original show. But I think, again, by the time I was two or 3 episodes in, I was hooked. By the time I was 5 or 6 episodes in, they had given me some moments that were heartbreaking and beautiful and awesome, like the original show. And by the time they got to the end of the season, there are a couple of scenes that are amongst my favorite scenes that have been in this whole story, and certain characters, certain actors that were so great. And I think the slightly more relaxed focus, as far as smaller group of characters, a little bit slower pace, although time jumps between episodes, that's been crazy. I think they're done with that now that they've set up the core group of characters and the ages they're supposed to be and everything. But no, I just felt like this was a really interesting season. I was actually kind of surprised to see how mixed some of the fandom has been on it. But then again, I've gotten to the point where if there's an established fandom for a thing that I'm appreciating, I've just about learned to tune out the fandom, because it's just a bunch of pointless arguing and negativity, whatever way you're leaning on something, So no, I was really impressed with where this show got us by the end of the season. How emotional I was about certain characters and what happened between them. That was just some great stuff. And the season ends with such a punch that really has you salivating for that. Why couldn't it be an 11-episode season, just so we could see what's Rhaenyra going to do now that she's gone from like hopeful and conciliatory to like now it's on.
Don't have babies back then.
Oh my god.
Don't have babies. What the fuck? I'm like,
but oddly enough, they're having so many of them.
I know, she had 6, and then had 5 that made it, and 1 that really didn't. Poor kid. That scene was that was insane.
Man,
I know.
That scene made me like, that was uncomfortable. Like I was very uncomfortable watching that scene.
Really,
I mean, it was a very powerful scene, especially in the context of like what's happening elsewhere in the show at the same time. But like that visual and just the graphic nature of it, and just I think it, the other, I think, huge win with this show is just that you kind of hit on it, John, is just that the casting is so great. And even with the time jumps,
Patty Considine,
right? Chanted, right?
Yeah.
But like, the time jumps and stuff like that, like it seemed to kind of like shake some viewers. I didn't personally mind it, but I just feel like the casting of, especially, Alicent and Rhaenyra, like, it was so impressive. And I think like the performances of both, or all the sets of the actors and actresses were great. But like, kind of getting to the end of the season with this core group that we're gonna pretty much be with for the rest of the show, was a pretty like bold thing to do, I think. And I think it paid off immeasurably. Like, I think the cast is great. All the performances are so good. And it kind of creates this, or doesn't create this. It's just kind of like, gets us back into this comfort or discomfort with this world that, we've all loved for so long. And it seems like, the show's viewership is like crazy high. It's a unquestionable hit for HBO and HBO Max and all involved. So, man, it just sucks that 2024, for another season. It's just brutal. But, make it good, make it as good as this season, make it better than this season. It seems like the pacing of the seasons to come was going to pick up based on some stuff I've read from the showrunner who's taking over in season 2. But was it Ryan Condal?
He was co-showrunner on the first season, right? And he's taking over.
But yeah,
it felt like Miguel Sapochnik was there as kind of as like
it
a style setter.
Yes, totally.
Like
agree with you.
let's get some continuity. Here's a guy who directed some of the big episodes of Game of Thrones. Let's bring them in to kind of bring it over. And so yeah, it didn't surprise me that he didn't stick around. But no, I'm just glad that there is this, like, George R.R. Martin seems to be signing on, and again, he seems to be somewhat involved as well. So does anybody have any favorite characters or moments they want to call out? Ronald, anything that really stands out?
I mean, acting wise, the king, how you pronounce his name?
Patty, I don't know if it's Patty Considine or Patty Considine, but the character is
That's...
Viserys, right?
Yeah, I think it's
Viserys. Yeah.
I loved him.
Whatever,
Incredible.
man, like, things get thrown around like tour de force and all that stuff. Like, I don't know if he was a Shakespearean actor or something prior to this. I know I saw his IMDb. It's not crazy. He's incredible. What he's doing.
That throne room scene is just like that. That's one of the things John mentioned. Like, that's an all-timer in all of Game of Thrones. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it is. Man. I mean, honestly, I was shaken by that scene. I was so emotional.
Yeah. I was so emotional at that part. I mean, and I think it's just like, it's almost like they understand that they have this, they understand how to tell a story. But one thing that I didn't always think about so much is like the passage of time and relationships between people. Like, sometimes the biggest killer is time. You know, that's a thing that you don't really see them talk about a lot in the regular Game of Thrones. But this really, because we're skipping around the way that we are, and you get to see people get older and see people change because of the circumstances, it paid off in a way that I could never have imagined in one season. This is like something you earn in 4 or 5 seasons, earned in one season. And that's kind of a credit to how well this is written, and the usage of time hopping I thought was going to be a fucking nightmare. So I'm like, I feel dizzy. I don't know what the hell's going on. It's at first, but then we get used to it. You're like, all right, skip ahead 10 years.
But then when they get to where they're going, you can see why they had why they wanted to start where they started rather than starting with everybody older. Because I think seeing the birth order of these kids that are going to carry the story, the history, especially seeing Alicent and Rhaenyra as young girls and their young friendships, seeing that rather than hearing about it was so much more powerful. And I also think taking Viserys from, you know, a middle-aged, able-bodied guy to like a guy who's like literally rotting away as he's sitting there, you know, I feel like that transition, like, honestly, we got to that 8th episode that has the throne room scene we're talking about. It also has that dinner speech that he gives that's just incredible. That stuff, that's like, whether it's Shakespearean acting or not, that's like Shakespearean level drama, and like that character is such a tragic character. And I think forever you'll be looking at characters on this show, the best characters in Game of Thrones, like Ned. I always think about how like there's this thing about Ned Stark in the first season where he seems like he's the guy most likely to, and then he doesn't. And then after one season, you're like, oh shit, this show just killed the hero. But you get to season 5, season 6, and you go, that guy was never going to be the hero of this world because he got because of the things that were going to make him not the hero of this world. He didn't know how to play this game. And I think Viserys is an example of a character who, like, we get to see that he actually does rule for decades, but like, he's too normal. He's too relatable. What a character says about him at one point that he would have been happy to just be a country lord, like reading his histories and having his hobbies and stuff. And it is like, okay, the reason why I loved Viserys as a character was because he was like that rare Game of Thrones character or Westeros character who's like, that's kind of how I might handle this situation. I might try to make everybody happy and please nobody, you know. But the fact that he did that for like 20 years, I feel like at some point we got to say, what about these leaders who just hold the line and who just barely hold shit together while they're a leader? Maybe that's not a glory, but there is something about that characteristic that, like, even in the last episode, we see, is it Rhaenys, like admiring about Rhaenyra, the fact that she's willing to show restraint at the war table. And I think that, like, that's something that she got from her dad, and that's really beautiful. But we also see how it's not going to serve her in this situation either, because we never get a chance to see what Rhaenyra might have been like if she could have ruled with restraint, because she's about to lose her shit. But so, yeah, this world is just full of tragic turns. And like Viserys, that thing he says to Alicent at the end, right before he dies, thinking he's talking, well, we're spoiling it. I guess if you're listening this far, you've heard spoilers, folks. But like, that's so tragic. Like, that's going to cause such problems, and it's so tragic. And it's one more thing Viserys did on his way out the door that was like trying to do the right thing and fucking up somehow and putting his foot in it. I just think that that's an unusual character, and I think it's really cool that we got a season almost to spend with this guy who's like, he really should not be the king of this world, but somehow he is, you know?
He's just like, will you stop bickering at my table? It's just like, stop this shit. Stop fighting over this throne, and none of you have the right to it until I tell you. I'm not even dead, and you're talking about that okay, that's another thing too, right? Something that you don't think about either. The idea that somebody's talking about you like you're dead already. Yeah. You may have 50 more years in you, but they're like, after you die and I take over, it's like, I can't wait till you die so I can be the ruler, and then I'll change everything. It's like, he's hearing that constantly and talking about his death constantly, that you don't think about that stuff until he's telling them how much he loves them at the table. He's like, I sacrificed all this stuff. I love you guys. Like, I don't give a fuck about what happens after I got. Just be good people. So it's just like cool things that
look at my half a face. Look into the half a face that loves you.
Oh God, how did they pull this off in one season? How?
Well, they had 8 seasons to pull from, but how did they just make a show that was this nuanced and good? I really think it's, they got great actors and some good writing, and I think they had the patience to know that maybe this season was going to take a little time for people to find their way back in. But once you're there, you said it, Steve. There's a certain kind of thing that you only get from this world,
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And I mean, something that like you mentioned, John, like the idea of like what happened in Viserys' like final scene. It is the scene, it is the incident that like basically takes us to episode 9 and 10 and what, is happening with Aegon and everything. But as we find out in that next episode, in our episode 9, where we kind of see the green side of things, even if it didn't happen, the hand, and the council were planning to do it anyway. So
they
like,
already had the plan.
We can say that like him misspeaking to Alicent and thinking it was Rhaenyra, and saying Aegon but the wrong Aegon, all this stuff. It's like we saw that, so that's the moment that like it kind of all just goes awry. But the reality is that there's so many mechanisms in place in this game, that we're watching, once again, this amazing series, that like there's these fail points, or there's this like fallback to like, she didn't have to hear him say that. He could have just died, and he could have went, having the last vision of like his family actually getting along, because he didn't see what happened with Aemon and Luke and Jace. Like he didn't see that blow up, so it could have ended for him, and in his mind it did, not realizing who he was speaking to. But I just feel like that's a great thing about the show too, in that this discussion we're having, it is the moment that everybody's like, oh no, why'd you do that? It's like, well, you fucked up. You said the wrong thing to the wrong person. But the reality is that the Otto and this council, and even to Alicent's not knowing it in that scene, I think is really great, to be like, wait, what? You were going to do this anyway? Like, things were in motion, like whatever his line is. It's just like, that's just fucking world, man. Like, you just don't know what's going on. And like, it's great, man. I love this season so much. And I just love the build through the season. Obviously, Patty was great. Matt Smith, who I noticed in this episode, the finale, like obviously Patty dropping off in the billing in the show.
Yeah.
Like Matt is like is top billing on the show now. And, like the cast is great. And visually the show is amazing. The whole dragon sequence in the end of episode 10 is just wow.
Insane.
It's just like, what can you say? I mean,
it's scary and upsetting, incredible. Honestly, really, really a
thrilling sequence to watch, on a TV show. You don't get that very often. And we've had it a few times this season already in its first season. So we're in for some treats, I think, so I'm looking forward to what comes for sure.
Well, just a quick note on that last scene and on something we were talking about with Alicent. I think that it's interesting how the show is using that. I told you how the book Fire and Blood has the history kind of mentioned in passing. In that history, there's no indication of why Alicent turned on Viserys's wishes. So the show, if we do believe what you said, Steve, which is that this would have happened anyway, they would have crowned Aegon anyway. Maybe that note was there to give Alicent the sort of plausible deniability, a softening of her character to say, okay,
Definitely.
She thinks she's going with Viserys's wishes, because as much as that was an arranged marriage and that one sex scene was really awful to see, there was this weird relationship between the two of them that was kind of mutual. There was mutual respect between Alicent and Viserys, especially when she was a young consort coming to talk to him before there was even a marriage. And as bad as that arranged marriage was, it always felt like Viserys wasn't that into the whole marrying a child thing. He did it anyway. Yeah. But I also think that at the end of this show, in the original text, it doesn't seem like it's an accident. Aemon flat out kills Luke and his dragon. In the show, it's similar to Alicent. There's a softening. It's presented as he should have known better, maybe. But Aemon is a kid too, in some ways, and he didn't intend. Neither of them were in control of their dragons in that last scene, and that's what made it so scary. But I swear they did so much to make Arax, is that the name of Luke's dragon? They did so much to make that dragon endearing. Just a few little nods that made him seem like he was a kid as a dragon. And I remember in Game of Thrones they made it hurt when the dragons went down towards the end of the final season. So I think that's something that's really creeping up on me, is how much I care about these dragons and the idea that they bond with a person. There's something kind of special about that. And I really felt this season ended with about as tragic of an event as could be if you are starting to care about these kids and their dragons, and that idea of of a young dragon trying to find their way in the world. I think that was really sad. But I think the show is trying to give us a more nuanced Alicent and a more nuanced Aemon than maybe is in that original text, by saying, the text says Aemon did this awful thing. We see that it was an accident. The text says Alicent did this awful thing. Well, we see that she honestly does. No one honestly believes her that she heard this. Even Otto is good play,
Yeah.
She's no, it honestly is what he said. I'm trying to make sense out of what he said. And as far as great actors who are still on the show, still living to be great next season, I think Rhys Evans is or Rhys Evans, however we say his name, as Otto, is just fantastic. He's just, and he gives you that same kind of quality that a Paddy does, of just really a guy who can really just put the right curls on all those syllables to make his lines really pop. And the kind of power player he is, of course, it reminds us of Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, but it's got that slightly different flavor. He actually comes from a family that has power, whereas Littlefinger was always a scrabbler, a guy who was defined by not having any, not being born to power. But no, I think that, and Matt Smith too. There was a moment in the season, when they showed up back, it was after the 6-year time jump, and Rhaenyra and Daemon are coming back to King's Landing, and they're noticing all the religious symbology and stuff. I noticed in that episode, it was oh, somehow they did it. I am now entering this new scene over the shoulder of Daemon and Rhaenyra, two characters who prior to that I had been sort of feeling distanced from. And suddenly the fact that they were showing me the changes at King's Landing through their eyes and catching me up on 6 years with their eyes, I was they did it. They got me on their side somehow. And Daemon is awful. He's terrible.
Yeah, he's awful.
But we still sort of like what he brings to a scene. And I think Rhaenyra is maybe destined to be tragic, but we see how there was a side to her that we really liked. And I don't know. I just think, it reminds me of Game of Thrones in that sense of, if someone's heroic, it doesn't mean they're going to make it through this okay at all. Those rules of storytelling have been thrown out. So.
Yeah.
And not to mention the fact that it accomplishes the task of getting you to care about and or even be interested in and root for bad people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You like a Jamie Lannister or or even Prince Oberyn, people that aren't really good people,
Tyrion.
But Tyrion, anybody, but Jamie comes to mind. They've done horrible things, but they accomplished some way of I could see things from their perspective a little bit as the show goes on, or you can sympathize with them a bit based on what they're going through now. But yeah, there you can see that in motion, like you're talking with some of these characters already, specifically with Damon. But
so you mentioned Jamie. I just have a quick question for you guys. People always mention Jamie throwing Bran out the window in the first episode of Game of Thrones as the whole thing of like this is a toxic guy. We never should have liked him. He's an example of anytime someone criticizes a character on this show for being unlikable, people always throw back to that moment. And I just want to ask, am I the only person who thought that was hilarious?
I thought it was so funny, man.
It's very funny. It's very
But like
funny.
when that first episode ended that way and you're being introduced to this world in this tone, I instantly got the joke that I'm supposed to kind of like the guy who just threw this kid out the window. Like I guess Bran did survive, but you don't even know in that moment that what's going to happen there. But I just thought like, oh, that's the world we're in, is the knight with the blonde hair like murders a child, because the kid shouldn't have been where he was. Like I was on board with Jamie as a character at that point. But again, I think that I was ready to believe we're supposed to like awful characters on this show. But so many people mention that moment like I can't believe people like his character. He still did this awful thing. And I'm like, yeah, but he did it because the kid was like snooping on him, and shouldn't have been. I don't know. I just think there's something about that dark humor to this world that is maybe more prevalent in Game of Thrones. It wasn't as prevalent in this season of this show. But Ronald, did you like Jamie nonetheless, even though he pushed Bran out the window?
I did, man. He's such a snarky asshole, Even when he got captured and was kind of traveling around as a prisoner, he became even more likable. It's like, you think that like he's going to get his comeuppance. And then when he got his comeuppance, I'm like, this is all right.
He just got cooler. Every time he got knocked around, he got cooler.
Yeah,
it's funny that the Lannisters are speaking of comeuppance, the Lannisters are trying to come up on this era of the show. Like they're not quite who they are later. I love those little, and the mention of Winterfell and the Starks in this episode really got me excited. Maybe we'll see some of that next season. So
I think so.
Got us on the hook.
That we are. House of Dragons season 1's out now, HBO Max. You can catch up on the first season if you haven't watched it yet. Sorry if we spoiled it for you, but it's your own damn fault.
Ronald, on the video you can like flash spoiler up on the screen or something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I'll just keep it on the screen, man, because it feels like just so people know.
Just leave it on the whole episode. And like, is this podcast called Spoiler? Did it change the whole approach? All right, cool. Well, so that wraps that up. What else? Did you guys watch anything else you want to kind of mention before we wrap up the episode?
Nothing.
Any other shows, movies, anything exciting?
I just want to say that Steve Carell has continued the act of not being funny anymore and just doing emotional dramas. And The Patient is like the most bleak. I don't even know that there's been a half-hour psychological drama before. But it's the most bleak half-hour psychological drama I've ever watched, and it just finished up its first only season. I don't know how it could have a second season if you've watched it. But Steve Carell, come back, be funny again. He's great in the show, by the way. But it's one more case of Steve Carell totally tamping down the side of him that got him in the door.
Interesting. I got to check it out. I watched the first episode, and I thought it was pretty good.
Well, Domhnall Gleeson is great as well, but it's funny. Steve Carell is doing the most nuanced, quiet performing of his career, and Domhnall Gleeson is like, put on a wig and like, I'll do a voice, and we're home, But they're both great.
Okay.
And David Alan Grier pops up later, and he's great too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I was going to mention, I saw VHS 99 is out on Shudder.
Okay.
It's like an annual thing. It is now, I guess, for that streamer. It was good. It was about on par with 94. Maybe I may have liked it a little more in terms of the consistency between each of the shorts. I mentioned I mentioned on the podcast last week the show, not the show, the movie Deadstream, that I really liked, and the filmmakers of that movie, Joseph and his wife, what is her name, Vanessa Winter, they have one of the shorts in here. I think it's called To Hell and Back. It's the one that ends the VHS 99. So it was kind of cool to see another thing that he acts in, and they co-wrote and co-directed together. That was definitely one of the standouts of VHS 99. And there's another one that's kind of, I think it's called Oz's World or Ozworld. It's like basically a send up of like Double Dare or like Legends of the Hidden Temple, like those kinds of game shows of the 90s. Like if they went too far. And those are pretty entertaining. But yeah, if you like the VHS films, and there's a ton of them to this point, but it seems like they've already announced the one for next year, VHS, I think it's 86. Definitely something here for you, I'm sure. And, I think this one was as good, if not a little better than last year's. And again, that's on Shudder. The other thing I wanted to mention, I saw a complete departure from anything horror related. I saw the new Julia Roberts, George Clooney rom-com Tickets to Paradise, and I don't fucking care, man. I liked it a lot, and
really?
I guess it's more so I just liked seeing them on the big screen together again, and or just in this kind of movie. And it kind of gets to what we were talking about before about like about bros, and just in terms of like a lot of the rom-coms were just like, okay, they're fine. Even the ones that people remember as being better than that, they really are just fine. It's more like they had the actors that were like you love because they were stars, and like you have two of the biggest stars in this rom-com, and whether or not they're bankable or their box office reliable anymore, this movie's already grossed $100 million internationally. It just opened in the States last week, I think, as kind of counter programming to Black Adam, and overperformed.
Wait, what's that? What's the Black Adam?
You're going to talk about it, I think, in a second, maybe. I don't know.
Is that like a Black Adder spinoff?
You tell me. I didn't see it.
Is Rowan Atkinson in this one, or is it like?
I don't know.
Might be.
Anyway.
But I don't know. Like, it's just the magic of like the star power, and I'm not not box office, nothing like that. Just on that screen, seeing George Clooney and Julia Roberts riff off of one another and just having a blast. Filming a movie in Bali, it's got to be a great vacation for them and theirs. But like, the younger cast is really good. Billy Lord's really funny. I love Caitlin Dever. I just found it very entertaining and fun to watch. It's just a solid rom-com. And again, Julia Roberts and George Clooney are like tops of my list for both sides, So like, especially Julia Roberts, like she's like 1 or 2 for me. So to see her again in that kind of role, and her smile and her laugh, like it's just.
Does she laugh? I was about to say, does she laugh? I guess she does.
Absolutely. Like it's just it's if you want it, it's there, and I definitely enjoyed it because of her and George Clooney. They're just great together, and Tickets to Paradise is again in theaters if you're looking for a rom-com, and don't want to watch a superhero movie, Black Adam. You can go watch Ticket to Paradise. But tell me about Black Adam. John,
the best format for this is you guys just hit me with quick questions, and I'll try to give quick answers about Black Adam. You said,
did you enjoy it?
Moderately, not really. Mixed negative.
Mixed negative. Is the hierarchy of DC forever changed?
All right.
I think according to what I saw on screen, I think it is. According to what I felt in my heart, no.
That's the one. Do you think that you'd want to see The Rock in more DC movies?
I oddly think that The Rock is not the weakest spot. I'm not going to try to take that kind of a hot take, but I think The Rock not really soaring and connecting as this character is the weakness of this movie, is the prime weakness of this movie. Because you could have kind of a dumb script and kind of a B-movie sort of story if you had like a super charismatic lead, but I think it's very ironic given all the hype about The Rock and this character and everything that's gone into this. It's like, it's one of those things where you watch a movie and you go, oh yeah, there was no reason to think that the hype was connected to anything real.
Yeah, but hype.
That they weren't really taking it to the next level. This is a very like middling superhero movie with some cool stuff in it. And and it does, if you like that sort of DC Zack Snyder kind of look and feel, there are some moments, there's some action. They do try to make it wall-to-wall action as much as possible, so at least it kind of moves at a decent clip. It's just a shade over 2 hours, so it's not the longest of these things. It doesn't punish you too much. But yeah, it's hard not to rate it against the sort of expectations that were being generated for it. But I realize in retrospect, that's just the hype. That's just what The Rock does. If The Rock was hosting a reality show on NBC, he would have done the same level of hype about it. He would have been talking about how he's going to take on Pat Sajak, So it's like, I think that in the end, I fell for the hype only in the sense that I actually thought, oh, maybe this movie is going to surprise me with what it has in store. But it's really just sort of exactly what you might think. And yes, if you were thinking, oh, Pierce Brosnan is probably the most fun part of this movie, you're right.
Okay.
But did it suck? No. It might have been more interesting and more fun to talk about if it sucked.
Okay.
Sounds like I'll probably wait for that to hit HBO Max. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's it for this weekend. You guys got anything else you want to mention?
No.
I want to mention two things just real quick. Saw Pearl. What a crazy movie. I thought that X was crazy. This was a little weirder. In the end credits have something, they do something that I'm just a big fan of that I have not seen before. That's all I'll say. It's nothing really crazy. It's unique. But overall, I thought it was nice. I enjoyed it. It was very bloody and felt like a continuation of X. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen with Maxine whenever that comes out in the next, 6-7 months, maybe a year. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was Gangs of London season 2. Man, if you like action, if you like adventure, if you like John Wicky sort of things, this is the show to watch. This Wiki. If you're into that sort of thing, watch this show. It is the most action-packed, almost to the point where like it is startling what they're doing in this show. And the second season ups the ante. Things get a little crazier. It follows the events that happen at the end of one, which are pretty story-shattering things. But yeah, it's Gangs of London. I'm on episode 3. The whole season is on AMC Plus, and it is looking and feeling like much more chaos is going to happen in the Wallace family. So
I can't wait to watch that. Again, though, just too much to watch, man. Too much to watch. All right, man. Movieschmovie.com is the website. Again, like we mentioned at the top of the show, there's a link there for it too, but Movie Schmovie can be found on YouTube if you go to youtube.com/Movie Schmovie podcast. If you want to find us there, you can make sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications when these episodes come out every Friday, but also when those special shorts come out throughout the week to get your movie news and the such. But if you want to subscribe to the podcast itself, the audio version of it, movieschmovie.com, you can go there, listen to episodes directly on the site, or pick your podcast platform of choice. Say that 5 times fast. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Again, required viewing for next week is 1999's Ravenous. I'm not quite sure where it's available for streaming. I should have probably looked that up before we started recording the episode, but I did choose it during the episode. So you could probably do a quick Google search if you want to find it. But yeah, we'll talk about that next week, and some other movies, I'm sure, and maybe some TV shows, most likely. You guys good to go, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. As always, thanks for listening. You made our day.
Bye.